Here we are again, back live for what will be 4 live hours before we go to our last show of what will be tomorrow morning. With Adam Goratley, we have up right now Andrew Colvin. He'll be followed by Dave McGowan, Ellen Lachter, and Angie Rydell. And I'll tell you what, Andy, it's good to hear from you again. How you doing?
Good. How are you, Biz?
All right, good deal. It's funny because down here, although there's been a lot of rain coursing through Florida, we've not had a lot right here. It's almost like some kind of Bermuda Triangle, which would not be lost on any of us. But wouldn't you think, one of the times I don't want to see an African downpour is right now. So anyway, we have storms all around us, and I don't know if that's going to affect things, but I want to let people know if you hear crackling and everything, it's not necessarily anything else except the weather that might be playing a little game with this, just to let you know. Other than that, everything's okay, and how you guys doing out in Seattle way?
Well, good. I saw some clouds the other day that looked like those earthquake clouds in China before that last earthquake, so I'm wondering if we're going to have an earthquake in the next few weeks. But it's funny you mentioned the Bermuda Triangle because they've mentioned that in the news in April. They've been calling up a lot of, in the media, they've been calling up a lot of paranormal stories from the past and a lot of mind control stories from the past, and really concocting an elixir of confusion that really has people reeling. It's incredible, and I think I figured out some of it, because there's just been so much stuff in the last 2 or 3 months, so many odd stories, so many confusing stories. One of the things, we've often talked about this, but one of the newer things I figured out is that they are using confusion that is used in hypnosis. And they will seemingly have 3 or 4 stories in one day, each of which has a bizarre a bizarre twist to it. Like somebody's doing something unusual in this story, somebody's doing something unusual in that story. And those stories will play off of 2 or 3 other stories in the same day, and give those stories a better twist than would normally happen. For instance, a piece of bad news for the elites will suddenly, because of the confusing twist given to the other stories, those stories will be downplayed or make it seem better than they really are. And I'll give you an example or two when we get into it, but there's hope.
There's what?
There is hope. There's hope.
That's not a word we've talked about much lately today.
I will qualify everything here by saying yes. I think they are starting a world war. And that was something that was prophesied by my friend back in '67 when he talked about 9/11. So I definitely think that is going to happen. But at the same time, I think we have tools now to better figure out exactly how they do this, and they've been doing it for 200 years, even longer. But it can be figured out.
All right, well, let me just get you up to speed. I know that you probably popped into the marathon along the way. One of the interesting things, and I'm thinking about doing this later if all parties would be agreed to it, and that is we're going to talk to Dave McGowan about some issues or topics or whatever you want to call it, that you've kind of resonated with or been involved with, and also Chris Knowles, who was on at the 6 o'clock hour. And one of the things we were talking about when he was here was the whole idea of what he called like the octopus, syndrome, where it's one of its best tools is a defense mechanism that murkies the water so you can't see anything and don't know what's going on. And I think in a way, that's what I got from what you were telling me about confusion. And so he spoke to that as well. And so did a listener who wrote a pretty poignant email about, let me see if I can remember what this is about or what he called it. I think it was, something maintenance. I'm so sorry, I can't think of it now, and I won't try to do it. But it all... And maybe I have it right here. Yeah, I do. I'm sorry. Perception management. Perception management and confusion. And so what's kind of neat is that, I didn't plan for this, but we usually, we had, in this particular marathon, we had people who are known to everybody. There was really nobody new, perhaps with the exception of Hank. And when it comes to things like what you speak to, McGowan speaks to, Knoll speaks to, there's a certain kind of, I don't want to even call it synchronicity, but you guys kind of cross paths. And so today, one of the things we've kind of dealt with is this idea that I think was coined very well by Jeff from San Diego when he talked about perception management.
Well, it's easy for them at this point because they've been working the TV angle for 50 years, 60 years, and they've sort of got it down. We have to continue to expose how that's being done, so that not everyone is always, programmed by it. One of the things that they do, they've sort of got everybody into doing is, it's a dualistic mental game of where am I right now, where do I need to be tomorrow? That's the basic idea. The idea of I'm in my yard, and wait a minute, there's a fence, and over the fence in their yard is something better. And that's the basic programming. You see the commercial on TV, you see the Coke bottle flowing, in slow-mo, and you see the happy people running, and it's that continual, I'm here, but I should be there. I'm here, but I should be Bill Gates, over and over again. And so all they have to do at any point is block that with some confusing messages, and suddenly everybody's lost.
Well, I tell you, I know you've got an agenda to go through, and I'm more than willing to take it on. But I do believe that, well, let me ask you this. As I talked to Chris about this, do you see an acceleration of confusion? Because that is something that is really damaging to most human beings. It really is. And do you find that perhaps on the rise right now?
Well, last time we talked about the vacuum. The waters were pulling out from the shore, and we were wondering why the big silence, because June was so quiet. And then right after we did that show, boom, it hit. There was an eclipse, or there was a full moon that night, and that was the 18th of June. And then suddenly, bingo! They rolled in whatever they had spent the last 2 or 3 weeks cooking up. We had this mass shooting that I was saying we were looking for. We had some big. A lot of the usual stuff, the dinosaur stories, the NASA stories, and global warming. They obviously started doing some military ops in different places, like along the Mexican border, in Iraq and so forth, and beating the drums about Iran more. And of course, what's driving all of this is the rise in gas prices, because that is destroying everybody's economy and driving us to war. And this was predicted over a year ago, or even longer. I think in the 2007 Bilderberg meeting, it was reported that they had talked about getting the price up to $200 a barrel, because it makes the oil shales in Canada affordable, and then they can go start doing it that way, getting the oil that way. But yeah, it's hard to say exactly. I think they are going to try to undermine Obama to some degree, even though they shouldn't, because he's not going to be a whole lot different. I think what's happening right now is the Rockefeller-Bush team is really behind the scenes working Obama, making him realize that he has to play it this way or else. And one of the major ways you can tell that is he's flip-flopped on FISA. FISA, as we've talked about many times, that has been a big story that they've tried to manage for the last year, because it involves the Rockefellers, and it involves really key issues for us, for the American citizen being spied upon, and that's something that they don't want to have come out, the extent of it, and the length of time it's been going on for decades, and just totally reading everyone's mail and listening to everyone's phone conversations. that happens out of West Virginia, and that's kind of why I focused on that. I try to deal with things in my life that I've come into contact with, like, for instance, with Laurel Canyon. I talked about some of the connections with my friend Bruce, who I'm working on a book with, and then little things come up, like one of them is John Denver. Well, I don't have a real connection to John Denver, but he lived in Laurel Canyon, and he knew a guy that I did a documentary about 20 years ago. Anyway, that's one of the little things. I just try to shoot for things that I just sort of come into my sphere by way of natural occurrences and people I've known. And it gives me a little better sense that I'm, I guess, keeps my feet on the ground, so to speak. Well, one of the interesting was, remember I mentioned Bob Tietz last time, the Human Potential Foundation guy who's a Mothman, West Virginia UFO researcher. And he seems to operate out of a town called Elk Garden, West Virginia. And I forget, one of the things I forgot to mention to you is that I did a search on Clay Shaw one time, and I found out that there was a Clay Shaw pharmacy in Elk Gardens, and so I'm wondering if Clay Shaw is actually from that town. So, I keep finding more and more of these little JFK links to West Virginia. Well, but anyway, I can get back to, I'm sorry?
No, I mean, you found...
I don't want to get off on any tangents here, but, I do love it.
We can sew it up, but I just want to say this. Well, first of all, I mean, you and I in the early times talked about West Virginia. I don't know that you were all that comfortable with it at the time, whatever. But all roads seem to pass through there when it comes especially to spook stuff, clandestine military ops or whatever. But I'll tell you another thing. Just want to pass this along because Chris Knowles had sent me an email, just kind of, light. Just he said, where do you think the X-Files was filming on 9/11? So I wrote back to him going, okay, I got to look at this in terms of weirdness. I said, so number one would be Pennsylvania/West Virginia. 2, I said New York City. 3, Washington, D.C./Virginia. And, of course, where were they? But in West Virginia. Yeah, I know. It's not shocking you, I know. But, again, here we go again. All right, well, look, like I said, I mean, you've got a place to go as we usually do when we do our shows, so I'm going to let you go ahead and tear into that.
Okay. Why don't we try to blaze through April? April is a big month. That's when we have our pagan holidays and so forth, and they're always, every year, that's really when they always roll out some new ops. And this year was no exception.
And let me just say something, too, to fill people in. If they've not been used to listening to us across the years, we're dealing with timelines and things that do happen. So when Andrew says it's April, I mean, that's where we're at because we've gone through years. So go for it.
Yeah, and also I just I've got this whole map in my head of the octopus, and I like to, each time I find a new spot, a new link, I talk about it, and sometimes it's a little hard to see all the different connections, but I do the best I can. But we, in this pantheon that I work in, you've got of parapolitics, you have supernatural stuff and you have political stuff, and the two, they've obviously figured out ways to use the two synergistically to play upon people's primordial beliefs in the supernatural. It's really widespread in America, and they can really plug it into politics, and a lot of times the Catholic Church is involved, or other religions and things. The whole East-West conflict between the religions. So sometimes I'll just bring up something like this. On April 5th, we had a Bigfoot conference in Butler County, PA. And that is the county we talked about before, where the Mothman movie was filmed and where Iron Mountain has one of its major headquarters. So the cryptozoologists always seem to follow some of these areas where ops are taking place and they will throw out these creature stories. Not that they're not important, I think they are, but they'll throw them out to sort of undermine and confuse people about political realities. The hoax story is one good way of doing that, and so there's probably a hoax story in here as we go through that I can illustrate that idea with. On the 5th, we also had a fire at an Exxon refinery in Torrance, California, and that was one of the little platforms that they used to jump the prices up. Along the way, we've seen several of these mysterious fires and explosions and pipeline ruptures, or in the case of Africa, some natives will attack a pipeline, and this helps to justify subconsciously the various price hikes that they're doing. On the 6th, they had, and again, I'm only hitting a few of these. I'm not hitting all the ones I've noted. On the 6th, we learned that Mukasey, the Attorney General, that's what he is, right? The new Attorney General, he had a 911 warning somewhere along the way. And again, I go from Yahoo stories, I go from mainstream Associated Press stories and things, generally. Here's one that wasn't on Yahoo. On that same day, we had Lauren Coleman blaming the stabbing of a cryptozoologist. Actually, he's not a cryptozoologist. Rupert Sheldrake, he's a scientist. He was stabbed by a crazy Japanese dude on the 2nd. And 6th, Lauren, who's often involved in these things, basically blamed that on, he has this thing called the copycat effect, where he tries to palm all of these various mass shootings on simple copycat behavior, which sort of obscures the fact that they're often timed to really bolster some sort of political agenda. But this is the first time we've seen the stabbing in the sort of paranormal world, one of these attacks, and Lauren kind of has used that to spread fear that now they're going to start attacking UFO researchers and people like us, who are doing this kind of research. And he's been doing that all along in the Mothman world by saying that anyone who studies Mothman is going to die. But now he's sort of branching it out to, UFO people, even though Cedric's a UFO person.
I just want to ask you for clarification. You did say that Avro program had moved to West Virginia a while back?
Which program?
Avro.
I didn't say they. There was a guy living there in the '60s who had a SWAT team come in and inject him and interrogate him, and he worked in the Avro program, and that was one of the stories that really keyed me into the fact that
okay.
is probably what happened to my father.
Okay.
But I know one of the things that happened recently was they've had some flying saucer creations or discoveries or whatever they've actually manufactured. A couple of different stories now have come out about how they've created new flying saucers in the lab. Have you caught any of those?
No, I haven't. No.
They're in the calendar, and when I come, I've highlighted them, so we'll get to them. On the 7th, we had, earlier I was talking about the problems that the elites were facing every week, and then the stories that would somehow solve the problem for them without actually solving the problem. So what they do is they use the story simply to obscure the problem instead of actually doing anything about it. And will I do that here? What was going on that week? Well, in April they just sort of hit everybody hard with everything. I mean, I think they just have a shitload of problems. They've got a big bubble, economic bubble that's about to burst, and they need to, create a new war to somehow alleviate that or to continue to milk the taxpayers. So, they're just hitting us with everything. And so I don't really think I have to point out each week's, particular problem. But all of these stories, they're either a truthful, observation. Like on the 7th, we had WAMU needing a $7 billion bailout, or we have bogus stories like on that same day they were talking about how Iran has nuclear centrifuges. So, it does get confusing for people because you don't know. I mean, you have to sit there and actually think, is this the bogus story, or is this, something that really is of concern? But on that same day, Jesse Ventura came out saying the 911 was an inside job. Jimmy Carter had a meeting with the Palestinians, and Cheney said that he needed extra security after he left his term. And also the Chinese cops were attacking people in England. As they follow the Olympic torch around, that's sort of been a theme, too. This Olympic torch has been going around to all the different countries, causing havoc everywhere it goes. And all of these things sort of mixed together to create constant tension. On the 8th, we always have these stories about fossils being found. They found some 35,000-year-old human tools in Australia. They found that shoppers who are in a bad mood spend more money. So, I mean, think about that. Mm-hmm. I mean, if they know that if they know that they can get you in a foul mood with some funky reportage, you're going to go buy more stuff. I mean, does it get any more explicit? They also found some more 911 victims' remains that day. So what they do is they continually bring in some of these older terrorism stories to amp up the threat, the supposed threat. The Olympic torch was in San Francisco on that day. On the 9th...
I'm sorry, I know you want to move, but I also, here's what I wanted to ask from you. This is the only time I can remember, and I'm sorry, but I mean, it happened before. I cannot remember it going back to 1960, where the Olympic torch run, if you will, the global run, has ever been as jaded, or adverse as it is as this one was. And I'm wondering if that also is a clue as to what's to come.
Well, I think the rest of the world knows that we're controlling China. I think that's really part of it. So suddenly all these Chinese stories are supposed to be of great importance to us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Okay. On the 9th, we had Haitian looting, because the food prices go up. More and more issues. Foreclosure looting, that's people whose houses have been foreclosed. They tear the houses apart. A pocket lie detector was developed. It's just to bring in the fear of the omnipotent state watching us. American Airlines canceled hundreds of flights that day, stranding flyers. Mm-hmm. The threat of not being able to move about, which is also, increased by the higher gas prices. People are really starting to feel like they can't go anywhere. On the 10th, Toyota had to recall like 600,000 cars. Cheney, it was found that Cheney had okayed torture. It was like definitely absolute proof that he had okayed the torture. That's a problem. That's the kind of story they'd love to distract from. So a story like there were sleeping guards at a nuke plant that day. They caught some guards sleeping. Would tend to distract you from Cheney okaying torture. Or guess what happened that day? That was the Texas sect story started to break. Mm-hmm. And that really would tend to deflect from Cheney's misstep. Anytime they get caught doing something, there's a diversion. On the 11th, the G7 finance ministers met in the U.S. There was E. coli found in the Clarksburg, West Virginia drinking water. Another way to terrorize people is to, make them think that there's going to be, some sort of something like that where your food or water is affected. Now we've got a salmonella break, floating around. There was a shocking GE profit drop on that day, on the 11th. By the way, GE is doing a lot of coal energy work in China, in Shanghai. They're supposedly developing new techniques to clean up coal emissions. They're not doing it here, of course. They're going to do it in China. What else? Oregon was hit with an earthquake. On the 12th, we had a Bermuda Triangle story. There were martial law drills in various states. On the 14th, the Pope's visit started to loom, and so stories started coming out. Is the church going to be? One was, will the Pope's visit boost the Catholic Church's profile? Food riots were reported that day. A big, huge oil discovery in Brazil, a new oil field. Of course, does that lower the price? No. On the 15th, Bush said that a new 911 was being planned, and I can tell you that when Bush says something like that, he probably means it. On the 15th, the Pope admitted that he was ashamed of pedophilia. Bush said that he will not regulate hedge funds. And that week was really big. This week, coming up to the 19th, when the Pope was here, they really kicked into gear. The Virginia Tech gunman anniversary was the 16th. Bush greeted the Pope at the tarmac on that day, which he's never done before. So he really showed the Pope the highest honor.
All right, be explicit about what usually is the case and why this was an anomaly.
What do you mean?
Well,
yeah.
Well, if folks don't know what usual protocol is, then they wouldn't understand why this was different. Usually, the head of state waits and the Pope comes up. This time, Bush went up to.
Oh, right. Yes.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really to show just how subservient he is. On that day, we found out that home building was at the lowest in 17 years. There was a Nazi hitman indicted in the Netherlands. A Minneapolis school teacher made some comments about Islam that caused a big furor, so they like to throw in, these issues are racial or Islamic issues. Netanyahu said that 911 was good for Israel on that day, and a bunch of other stuff actually on that day, which I won't go into. But on the 17th, China snubbed CNN's apology because CNN had demanded, it said some things about China. I forget what they were exactly, but the feds decided to collect DNA from anyone who's arrested, or they started floating that idea, the fear of the omnipotent state. And then Chertoff says on the 17th, the fingerprints aren't personal. That's sort of like Scalia saying that torture isn't, that waterboarding wasn't torture. What did he say exactly?
Right.
Yeah. And then Ahmadinejad bumbled some sort of 911 inside job comments. And this is where they start to throw in confusion, because that was a confusing little story. It's like, well, how did he bumble it exactly? And then you read the story and you really didn't get it. And then, so what I figured out they were doing this week was they were covering up the Catholic Church's pedophilia with the Texas compounds pedophilia. I don't know if anybody caught that. That's what happened. They knew that this pedophilia was going to be the big issue when the Pope came. So what happens? Even before he gets here, 2 or 3 days before he gets here, they start in with the Texas sect, and it took over and really I think made it seem a lot less of a problem. Well, if they're doing it at a compound in Texas, well, I guess the Pope's the Catholic Church isn't so bad. So on the 18th, they kind of got into the Oklahoma City thing. They had a story about Oklahoma prison sex slaves. And that tended to do the same thing. It tended to make the Catholic Church's issues a little less. And then that same day, an Oklahoma City hero who had pulled some people out of the records and so forth died in jail. That day, the Pope was reported to be wearing ruby red shoes, which was an allusion to Oz. They're starting to get into the hallucinatory stuff. The painkillers increase migraines. Story came out that day. Incontinency drugs cause memory loss. The Toronto 18 case fell apart. Citigroup had a $5 billion loss reported that day. And anytime you have Citigroup or any kind of Rockefeller story where they're losing big money, they will start throwing in these confusing stories to actually make it seem like that Citigroup loss is an anomaly as well. That's what it tends to do. These other confusing stories make it seem like, hey, Citigroup will come back. That can't be right, The Pope was at Yankee Stadium that day. Bush and Prime Minister Brown had their little press conference in D.C. They really made sure to, honor the Pope and make sure that Britain and America were together and to show him that we were still together and under his authority. The Freedom here's a nice little confusing story that came out that day. The Freedom Tower plans for the new 911, site were found in a trash can. And what did I write about this? I wrote down some notes about that. Just sort of, what was my wording there? It makes since Osama, there was a story about Osama that day, too. The movie Finding Osama opened, and it kind of tends to make, that story about the trash can sort of, I think, made a lot of these other stories seem like they should be in the trash can as well in our minds, like Osama. We shouldn't think about Osama anymore. He's in the trash can. We shouldn't think about Oklahoma City. It's in the trash can. You see how it works? I mean, you'd have to, I guess, take hypnosis courses like I have to understand how these things can bleed over into one another. But I'm absolutely sure that this is what they were doing. I'm not absolutely sure, but it's really, I think...
It's pointing in that direction, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. These ideas should be abandoned. And the thing about the Osama movie is that he originally, by the way, the guy who made it from West Virginia, he originally said that he had found Osama like a month before that, and that the movie was going to be about how it was so easy to find him. Well, by the time, and suddenly a controversy erupted, and a month later, he suddenly is saying, well, it was really hard to find him, and we didn't actually find him. So he was forced to change the ending of his movie, I'm pretty sure. The Pope visited a synagogue on the 18th, which is unusual. So that's another little, strange story. Why would he do that? Bush appeared on a game show, which I guess kind of makes sense, but it's kind of unusual for a president to do that. And on that same day, on the 19th, guess where Obama and Hillary were during their race?
What day was
West Virginia. West Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff is it can't be coincidence. The 911 black box data was released that day. Did anybody find out what was on there? I didn't. Did we know what was actually on that black box data? I don't know.
Also, we got a comment for you, real quick, just as an accent. From the Collins brothers, probably Paul, I think. It says, Andrew, remember that Chertoff defended terrorist financier Magdi El-Amir when he was in private practice. That might put his statement in context.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So,
absolutely.
All right. Okay.
The Army reported they have robotic suits on the 19th. That's also the day that the Pope was first brought into power, the new Pope. Story about how pets go crazy during earthquakes. There was snow in Seattle. That day. Very rare.
Mm-hmm.
On the 20th, we're moving on a little after that now. The 19th is always the big day because it's Hitler's birthday. The next week was the NAFTA conference in New Orleans that Bush attended. And so they had a few more things to sort of get us off of not thinking about what the heck we should be doing about NAFTA, because we all know we should stop that as soon as possible save our own jobs. So what do? They have some Al-Qaeda stories, they had some high school shooting plots on the 21st, another Columbine attack possibly, an earthquake in Illinois, Carter and the Hamas thing. There's a story that there was a hoax that led to the Texas polygamous sect raid. Did you ever hear that one?
No.
I mean, so it turns out that was a setup, and it's right here in it was actually reported. But they waited until it was all over, until the Pope had left to actually report it. Financial crisis moving beyond the housing realm. And on the 22nd, AT&T reports its profits are up. and that's probably, due to the phone business that they have, which, by the way, uses a Garuda-like mascot, which we talked about last time. There were some Phoenix lights seen. Anytime you hear the word Phoenix, you have to perk your ears up because we've got several different Phoenix things that have been coming up. The Phoenix lights. We've got the Phoenix lander that's on Mars right now. We've got the Phoenix retrovirus. One of the synchronicities that happened last week was I pulled a stack of New Yorker, out of a bin, and I pulled one out, opened it up to a page, and there was this story about retroviruses. And the guy is recreating these old viruses from years ago, from centuries ago, and he laughs it off because supposedly they're not as bad as some other viruses. But guess who was the primary mover and shaker in virus research in the early 1900s? The Rockefeller Institute in New York, which became Rockefeller University.
Mm-hmm.
So we had on the 23rd, to sort of get you off of that NAFTA story, we had penis thefts in the Congo, and a witch was beheaded in India. So they'll throw in some supernatural things. Oh, and there was a ghost rape in Federal Way. We had and this is in Seattle, 2 women in Federal Way, which is where the original UFO Man in Black, Fred Krisman, lived. They were saying that they were being raped by, what did they say? They said that, here it is. They said that a paranormal person has been placing sensors on their bodies and having intercourse with them. A paranormal person. Anyway. On the 24th, the Hitler doll was sold in the Ukraine on the auction. Jimmy Carter was called a bigot by the Israeli UN ambassador. The Virginia Tech gun dealer visited the campus. And the Syria, North Korea nuke thing was being played. They were just sort of hitting all the bases at this point. The Sean Bell case in New York, the cops were cleared, but there wasn't any riot like with King, Rodney King. So I think one of the reasons is because of this strange mix that they figured out, is that they can now report that cops have gotten away with beating the crap out of somebody and not have people react. China met the Dalai Lama's envoy. There was a Nigerian pipeline attack on the 25th. Bush was starting to say that your tax rebate would somehow save you. Remember that story? That your tax rebate was, they actually stopped calling it a tax rebate. David Rockefeller donated $100 million to Harvard on the 25th, and they had some warning shots in the Gulf. There was the Carlyle group bought an occultly numbered building on the 26th. There were a bunch of global warming stories on the 27th. On the 30th, David Blaine held his breath for 17 minutes on Oprah. There's this whole thing with the number 17 that's been coming up. Chris Knowles has been blogging about it. And on the 30th, the Rockefellers chastised Exxon for not being green enough. I thought that was really cute of them to do that.
Good word, yeah. Uh-huh.
They were proving that they were greener than the company that they own, which is making profits on the backs of all of us. Very nice.
Okay.
So that's April. I don't know what all we missed in there, but toward the end. But you want to go? Any questions? You want to go back to that list I sent?
Well, I'll tell you what. We only have about 9 minutes left, and McGowan's coming in after you.
Okay.
Is there enough there that you want to address with regard to Laurel Canyon? Only because it resonates, or if it doesn't even resonate, it just still deals with something that's very strange that was going on there. Are you okay with discussing that?
Well, I don't. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot on that, but I can just look at this list and tell you what has got me the most excited in the last few days. How's that?
Okay. All right, that's good.
One is regarding that Minneapolis bridge collapse, there's a story here that came out at the time that I just found that someone had been feeling strange frequencies a couple of hours before the bridge collapsed.
Mm-hmm.
Which gets back to that whole idea of bringing down a bridge with a Tesla coil, which vibrates, causes us to. And we've talked about that bridge before. What else? We talked about that. Here's one. The Lusitania and the Titanic thing. Did I mention the Titanic last time? That I suspected that the iron from it, that had been brought down by using substandard iron in the rivets.
Mm-hmm.
Did I mention that?
I don't believe you did.
Okay. Well, this book came out about that recently, and knowing that the Rockefellers perhaps had something to do with the Hindenburg and a lot of other different disasters, including 9/11 and so forth, I started thinking about these ship sinkings because all these transportation disasters seem to have pushed us into using cars more, which benefits them more because they sell more gas. And the Titanic, I had a suspicion about the Titanic just when I heard the story about the substandard iron, that maybe it had something to do with Buckeye Steel, which the Bushes own. I don't know why I thought that. This is the way I work. It just pops into my head. And then I looked at a little research and found that the company that owned the Titanic was IMM, which is an American company, which also, I think, built ships, had some corporate dealings with the Hamburg America line, which was owned by Barbara Bush's family. And IMM was financed by Prescott Bush and those guys. So yes, there is, I think, here adequate evidence to at least suspect that Buckeye. If you were financing a ship line and you also had some steel mills, you might just decide to palm off some bad metal onto those ships, especially if they're in another country and you can sort of cover it up by shipping it over there where it won't be, it's harder to be sued, I think, like shipping off all the metal from the World Trade Center to China to be melted down instead of here. I think they use the same template over and over for all these different ops.
Well, let me just run this by if you can. I mean, I don't know if we're going to go much further, but I just feel this might be a good way to go on our way out as well, and that is, this is something that Harry said to me a long time ago, and it seems to be the case time and time again, and that is we send our people into space and we send our people off to war with the goods that are made by the lowest bidder. And there's a certain amount of the problem there where profit also is predominant over the troops' safety and efficacy. But there's another thing I want to bring up to you too, and I don't know if you've ever gone down this road, or the shipping lane, I probably should say, but are you familiar too with that portending book called The Titan, which foretold of the sinking of a ship that we would come to know in reality as the Titanic?
I did not. I know that that's the title of a Rockefeller book.
What, Titan?
Yes. A recent one that I talked about on your show, actually, that was paired up with a Princess Di book and a West Virginia rocket book, and then a book about Jonestown by the lady whose family's from West Virginia. But the other angle of this is the Lusitania, and there's a book that's just come out about Crowley organizing the sinking of the Lusitania. Now, the same, you don't have the same holding company owning the Lusitania that you do the Titanic, but you have the same players because J.P. Morgan wanted to take over both companies, IMM and then the Cunard line in England that owned the Lusitania. So it was in his, both sinkings helped J.P. Morgan in a way. And Crowley would have been doing this, who knows why, but, because it was a British company and he's a British agent, so why would he sink it? Unless it was to benefit J.P. Morgan, the other side, so to speak. Not really the other side, but,
But, Andrew, remember this, too. The Lusitania was the triggering event, as Pearl Harbor was for World War II. And
Absolutely.
It said, well, people will say, well, the Lusitania was sunk maybe 1 to 2 years before we got in. But remember, you need a time to arm. And so you had the triggering event, and then you went back, and the industrialists armed us, and off we went. And so this makes perfect sense as far as I'm concerned. And remember, yes, J.B. Morgan and the rest of the robber baron family is going to make a lot of money because the industrialists and bankers are always the ones who come out victors in any global conflagration.
But even more important for those of us studying the parapolitics is that, again, this is more evidence that Crowley is indeed Barbara Bush's grandfather, because it means he was mucking around in the shipping business, which is, where her family made the dough. They owned that key Hamburg America line that was bringing Nazis over for rallies and then sending money back to Hitler. So, I think this is big news in a way. And a lot of this stuff seems to have been floating around for a lot of old timers know this stuff. But I think today, with the internet and so forth, there's a lot more connectivity, and people are, this word is kind of spreading about all these stories, and it's pretty dramatic stuff, I think. Another interesting story was the Owego, New York thing that sort of came up. I know we've just got a couple minutes, but someone had written to me and said, yeah, the Rockefellers were stealing horses. That was how they first got started in Owego, New York. And I looked up Owego, and I find that it's at the confluence of 3 rivers, so it would have been sacred Indian ground. It turned out to be a place where the Iroquois Nation had one of their biggest peace, agreements were made there. And guess what? Appalachia, New York is right there. That's where the mob was effectively taken over. So that kind of means that, I think, it sort of points to where the Rockefellers, takeover of the Italian mob and other angles, with regard to that, and how the mobs became integrated more with the FBI and the CIA after that. And then there's a company there today called Insco, which I found interesting. A lot of the things they do would tie right into a company that would potentially be involved in something like 911. I'm not accusing them, I'm just saying, when you're involved in NASA tracking, underground facilities, robotics, defense and security, doing work on the space shuttle, doing work for Lockheed, where they actually build the presidential helicopters, with Boeing, and with GPS devices. I mean, that's the perfect company to, have a couple of guys, program some flights, program some planes to fly in certain places. I mean, they might have known what they were doing even,
Hey, Andrew, I'm sorry, we're going to have to hold it right there. We're at the top of the hour. But I'm going to ask you also, we can continue this, obviously, throughout the month, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Andrew, thanks a lot. We've been talking with Andrew Colvin. The website is andycolvin.com. He's been on to talk about the Mothman. And, of course, we've been keeping a long-time series now about synchronicities and coincidences, if there's such things, in our world. We have Dave McGowan coming up next. I think Dave is with us right now. So, Andy, we thank you very much, and we will see you down the road.
Thanks, Ed. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye, Andy.